So I would like to present our next speaker, somebody who I was able to finally meet yesterday after several emails back and forth and several phone calls back and forth. And I'm really pleased he was able to make it out this weekend. So Wayne Penny is the CEO of Mito Canada Foundation. He co-founded Mito Canada in 2009. Wayne is responsible for raising awareness for mitochondrial disease, overseeing patient support, business development, and aiding researchers in the medical community to fund mitochondrial research. LHON Canada is very excited to work with Wayne and Mito Canada moving forward. Please welcome Wayne Penny.
Thanks for the introduction there, and it's an honor to be here to speak to this room full of people who are directly impacted and dedicated a lot of their lives to studying these diseases. And it's great to hear Dr. Lehman and the work that she's doing here locally in BC as well. For many people who are impacted by mitochondrial disease, or most people in this room by LHON, it can be a long journey. And I'll start off with a story about my son, if you want to move to the next slide, which was my connection to mitochondrial disease. My boy Evan was a perfectly normal child until he was 4 years old. He woke up one morning with a sore stomach, and we took him to the hospital, and the doctors suspected he had appendicitis. I said, well, we should just get him in, we'll take the appendix out. It's low risk, quick surgery, and we whisk him off into surgery. And Evan doesn't wake up from the surgery. And I think, oh, not a big deal. He's had a reaction to the morphine. We'll just wait it out. So we wait 4 hours, turns into 8 hours, turns into 12 hours, turns into 18, 24, and 36 hours later, like something is wrong here. And in that time period, Evan had suffered a severe brain injury. And we didn't see that happening at the time, and it was all, to be honest, to this day, still such a blur. And Evan became a real puzzle to the medical team. Yeah, they didn't know what was going on there. They didn't know what had caused this, but Evan was very dystonic. He was stiff as a board and basically eyes wide open and just didn't move. So they had a team of medical specialists who pored over him for weeks on end, trying to understand what was going on. And they initially diagnosed him with a neurological disease called ADEM, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. So the good thing about that was that 9 out of 10 kids would fully recover. So we're like, we're going to make him better. We're going to fix this. And we went on the rehab plan. And unfortunately for Evan, he didn't improve. He started getting worse, started developing seizures. He was having hundreds of seizures a day. And barely able to basically sustain life. And that's when doctors started suspecting there's something else going on genetically and metabolically underneath. And unfortunately, Evan wasn't even stable enough to do a muscle biopsy. They were suspecting mitochondrial disease. But eventually, we did stabilize some of the seizures, some additional testing, we did a muscle biopsy, and it showed that Evan had a low complex 1, 3, and 4. So he did have poorly functioning mitochondria. So for Evan, and that took a year to get that result, and after that, basically our doctor said, we think your son has a mitochondrial disease. He falls into the probable mitochondrial disease category. We don't know what the mutation is. We're going to continue to look for that. I would encourage you to go check out the UMDF website for information. They have an annual conference, and I recommend you go. So that was basically, and come see me in 6 months. So that was 11 years ago, or 10 years ago, because it took a year. And I think it goes to show the power of bringing people together. And it was at that conference that I met some other Canadian families, and we said, much like Kavan and Lisa and others have said, we've got to do something about this. If we're going through this and figuring this out on our own, everybody else is stuck doing it. Let's try and bring people together and help each other out. So we decided to get together and talk about what could we do to make a difference back in Canada, to raise awareness and support other families and that type of thing. So if you want to go to the next slide. And that was sort of where the genesis of starting an organization to do those things. And it was clear that a lot of research needs to be done to better understand the disease, and that was only going to happen through raising larger sums of money. In order to do that in Canada, you need to be able to issue tax receipts, so you need to become a registered charity, which I think Canadians can appreciate, which is just a whole other task in itself, and it's not an easy path. So back in 2009, we went through that process, and in early 2010, we managed to become officially registered as a charity. And since 2010, we focused on sort of three main aspects of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. So awareness, most people, like we had never heard of mitochondrial disease when our son was diagnosed. And most people you talk to when you say, have you heard of mitochondrial disease? And maybe even less so when you say another rare form of that, LHON. Very few people have heard of it. So awareness is a huge piece. Supporting the families, helping them on this diagnostic journey, helping them find the right specialists, and all those sort of things is another very important piece. And then obviously on the research front, it's clear so much more work needs to be done to understand mitochondrial function and the role it plays in both primary and secondary mitochondrial disease. So from an awareness standpoint, we've taken the approach of trying to do things that really make it easy for people to connect to the disease and understand it, because it can be a very complex disease to understand. So trying to simplify that message. One of the initial things to raise awareness and funds was creating a Team Mito. So I had a background in sport, and a lot of our friends and supporters had that background. So we created Team Mito, much like team in training for leukemia or team diabetes, that type of thing, where we did events, and through that we've done 12 Guinness World Records to create these spectacles. Even ran a marathon in a dress as a battery last fall to help people try and make that connection that the mitochondria is the battery of the cell, and doing unique things like that. And so that's been very effective. We've gotten lots of media through that, and it's really helping us get that message out to the general public. It's one of our visions is that in maybe 10 to 15 years, you can walk down the street and people are aware of mitochondrial disease, just like they're aware of cancer, and it's more of a common thing. And also proclamations and things like that to establish mitochondrial disease and engage the cities and that type of thing for Awareness Week. And this is a picture of Marcia Crossman from Regina, and a great example of the impact of connecting and bringing people together. Marcia reached out and so she's experiencing all of these weak muscle symptoms, and her doctor didn't quite believe there was such a thing as a mitochondrial disease, and she said, there's no specialist in Saskatchewan. Where should I reach out? So we put her in touch with Dr. Neil Kahn in Calgary. She got her testing, she got her diagnosis, and it was a real peace of mind for her. And she's also stepped up and helping raise awareness and get that word out, and helping others, and that peer support, and helping them down that path, which is hugely powerful, and helping many others. So it's a real domino effect with that. So we're trying to do other things and just directing people to where the specialists are, providing information on our website, that type of thing. But one of the challenges we face around support is there's a lot of different support needs, and that's an area we want to continue to improve upon, and there's lots more we can do on that front. So on the research front, we've been able to dedicate over $1 million to fund research over the past 9 years, and up until recently, we've had a panel of our committee that would put out an open call for RFPs, and we'd issue individual grants. And it was about 2 years ago that Mito Canada and Dr. Andreazza, who I'll introduce very shortly here, will talk more about MitoNet, about bringing together the Canadian research community, so that we don't just have pockets of researchers and specialists doing their thing, but bring them all together with a larger vision. And Anna will tell us more about MitoNet, but that's been a big focus over the last little while. And we've also funded a couple PhD students. We've been funding some next-gen DNA sequencing projects in Calgary, which have also spun off into some separate nonprofit organizations like the Magic Clinic and MitoFind that patients are able to access for free sequencing. and also Dr. Tarnopolsky, with one of his early studies through Mito Canada funding, has spun off Exerkind. So there's immediate research, but looking at what is that domino effect you can have with the work that's being done to do bigger and better things from the research side. Okay, so from here, what's next for Mito Canada? It's working with groups like this and building stronger partnerships. And we're just talking about that earlier with Dr. Andriaza. We have a fall conference coming up in Toronto. Maybe there's an opportunity that we can work together to do something there. So it's leveraging each other from partnerships to do these types of things. From an awareness standpoint, we want to get more education programs into the frontline physicians. One of the challenges with mitochondrial disease is the prevalence. So the diagnostics rate is very low, estimated at 10%. So there's a lot of patients walking out there that don't even know that they have a mitochondrial disease, so understanding that root cause. So we're working with Australia. They've set up a physician education program. That's something that we're going to look at implementing in the future. From a support standpoint, as I was saying, like the challenges between pediatric to adult to geography, if you're in rural Canada versus in an urban center, or someone who has been living with this disease for 20 years and has learned how to manage it versus someone who's been newly diagnosed, with all those different needs. So part of this is just trying to understand how do we best serve that patient population and provide those supports. And from a research standpoint, MitoNet is very much in its early days, and it was initially focused around a big network Centers of Excellence grant that we were pursuing, and unfortunately weren't successful. But what it did do is allow us to bring the community together, and the next steps now are looking at how do we evolve the Canadian Mitochondrial Network, and what does that look like in the future. So that's going to be a focus, and a big part of that, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, is creating patient registries and strengthen numbers. So we're working with a group called InDoc Research. They're a not-for-profit data analytics group in Ontario, and they created a brain code with the Ontario Brain Institute. So we're looking to extend that and create the Mito code, which will allow us to bring together patient data, clinical data, your imagery data, all the omics data, and be able to allow researchers in an open source platform with the right security levels and access, obviously, to be able to build upon that body of data and knowledge for future research, but also allow patients to be able to access and look for others who have similar mutations and what types of treatments that they're using, these types of things, so they can explore that on their own and hopefully find different ways that they can maybe suggest to a physician that we could be trying different things. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front, but a strong vision being built around that. And then lastly, we can only do that with funding. So it's a big part of what we do, is trying to raise those funds. And we have a goal of becoming a multi-million-dollar a year organization that can dedicate those funds to really scale the research impact that's needed. So that's as much in a nutshell what Mito Canada is doing and what the priority is going to be going forward. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Anna Andriaza. She's making her way to the front here from the back. So Anna is a researcher at U of T, and she's a professor there in the psychiatry and pharmacology department. And she's also one of the founders of, she's the brainchild from the scientific side for creating MitoNet. So I'm honored to be able to present or introduce Anna to tell us a bit more about research in MitoNet. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. This was a pleasure to talk with you in a phone. You are one of those persons that bring a smile to my face and make me believe that science is here for a reason and can make a difference. So really thank you for having me here, and thank you, Blaine, for the kind introduction and the words for me. So I'm a scientist. I'm a basic scientist that asks questions all the time, and I'm listening to you guys speaking this morning, and I'm hoping to raise my rank, but I'm like, it will be such a nerd question. Maybe I ask you later. So I'll take you out of this beautiful conversation. It was very inspiring for me to hear and talk to some of you today and learn what you go through on your journey, and then see how much things that has been done for other diseases that you might don't think about it that are related to mitochondrial disease could actually help you to improve the science or the discoveries in the daily basis or disease. So let me walk you through what is MitoNet. So MitoNet works on this challenge that I'm not going to try to take too much of your time because I know I'm someone that stands between you and that delicious lunch over there. So MitoNet works on the challenge that you think that mitochondria is this power, is the battery that Lena was talking, is that energy metabolism in your body that have to keep you going. So the alterations in the mitochondria have such an impact and a phenomenal different pathologies in our body. It can be something like what I study every day in my lab, psychiatric conditions. You would not expect that patients with bipolar disorder, the main cause behind the pathophysiology of bipolar disorder is alteration on the complex one, on the coenzyme Q10, the one that you have been spoken this morning. A very similar defect, but in a lesser extent, and specifically in neurons, have an effect in the brain of these patients and lead them to vary from a very high manic stage and a low depressive stage. So very different stages on the energy metabolism in the brain. That's what I do every day. That's what I study, try to recompensate that metabolism in the brain. But the question that came to me years ago was when I gave a lecture for patients in a family advocate settings for the International Bipolar Society. And shortly after, a mother called my office line. And she said, I really enjoyed your talk. I have a son with a bipolar disorder. I lost 2 kids on a very severe mitochondrial disease. Do you know why? Are they connected? Can you help me? And for a single split of the moment, I froze because I didn't know the answer of her questions. But my answer to her was that, yes, I want to work with you. And that's how MitoNet was formed, on that simple call, because I realized that it was much more just what I was doing there. And I want to use the knowledge that I had to not only help patients with bipolar disorder, but those of suffering of a classical mitochondrial disease, but learn from them one that received so much funding on the Cancer Foundation and now developed a new drug that targets cancer because of the hypoxia in the cells, that lack of ATP, and they bump it up that to kill those cells. Can I use that medication, engineer back and try to put it in other contexts of disease? That's the challenge. And that is hope. Next slide, please. The hope is there. There is so much new technology coming out, new medications coming out for mitochondria that we need to bring to Canada. I think there is such a lack of accessibility of novel technologies and novel medications and treatments in Canada. And that's one of the main hopes that MitoNet is here, to try to bring something like the reviving the organs that is done in Harvard. They take a piece of your own heart, of this congenital disease in kids, remove the healthy mitochondria, and inject it back on the dying organ of that kid and revive the heart of that kid. It's incredible, isn't it? It's science fiction? No, it's actually reality. There is 10 patients that actually have gone through that. Yes, there are challenges with that, but we need to be able to question ourselves and be able to challenge ourselves every day and bring things like that also available for Canada. I'm from Brazil. I love you see you guys talking about the family and the families of Brazil. So why not also bring to other parts of the world? Be a little bit more expansive of that. Mitochondrial replacement therapy was very well spoken here. Such a difficult technology. I couldn't much more agree with what you said this morning. It's much to learn. What 20 years down the road? Can I then, what Dr. Lehman said, can we use our own mitochondria, the one that doesn't have the mutation, instead of using a 3-organ organ? Yes, can we do autologous replacement, mitochondrial replacement therapy? So all those questions are up in the air, and we need to find the funding that Lane was saying to help us to take this to our next stage and level. But in my view, there is only one way to do that, if we work together and not in separate silos. Ask the questions in one single way. Next slide. I will skip this slide for sake of time. That's why we need this network. We need people to gonna become in partnership. So I urge you to come and become partner of us. Come work with us together, and let's break the silos. Let's not focusing a disease. Let's focus in the mitochondria and understand how the mitochondria work, and hopefully help each other to grow and get better medications. And I'm going to talk to you guys why Abdon is not in Canada. I don't understand. I need to understand that question. That question needs to become clear to me. So become better policies, better standards of care. I think it's amazing, Dr. Lino, what you're doing in BC. You have nothing like that in Ottawa. Why? Or in Toronto. Why? Why we don't have the same standards of care that you offer for your patients in BC in other parts of Canada? How can we make them more broadly accessible to everyone? So those are questions that we can answer when we have a network of people working together. Nowadays, this slide is actually a little outdated. We actually have 130 investigators now, which includes researchers and clinician scientists. Some of you that are in this room are actually part of MitoNet already. And if you're not, please join us and become part of the network as well. Mito Canada Foundation organizes the patients and centers the care of the patient, and is our voice of patient that advocates for our families. We also have industry and other partners that work with us, such as IBM, for example, that is helping us to bring together the brain code, helping to bring together the brain code, and now is helping us to move with the microcode in Doc Research, which is another company that is helping us to bring. Why this microcode is such thing that is so important? We talk about patient registry. This is a way of doing patient registry, but in a much, much broader way, because at the same time that you carry just the characteristics, you carry the clinical data, you're connecting with the medical records of the patients, and connecting with the research, any clinical trials that as patient goes through, is all become part of one single data. Sounds impossible? No, it's actually quite possible. It has been done already for psychiatric conditions and neurological conditions. It's called the brain code. It's working. I use every day. So why cannot we do for mitochondrial disease? Next slide. I was past this one. Yeah, so this is basically based on our strategic priorities. We focus in one simple question. Why mitochondria works and acts in so many diseases. How can we actually try to bring that together and develop new knowledge? For that, patient care, patient advocacy is central for us, and that's why centralizing this picture. Around that wheel that you see there is the development of the next generation of high qualified personnel. We need to train the people that are going next to us, not only from the geneticist to the medical doctor, but to the scientists, to the family advocates, to the politicians, everyone that is involved in the system. If I have a beautiful scientific finding in my lab, but I don't push forward to become an innovation that is disclosed, that actually going to become to be transformed in a policy or a treatment for the patient, then I'm doing no good in my own science. That will need to spin to go back to the center and make it a difference on the lives of everyone affected with a disease or families around them. And I will end here and invite you to please come to Toronto in November 8th. I'm sorry, this is outdated. It's November 8th, 10, and 11. We had to change it due to a venue problem. So scratch that out. And we will send the contacts for Lisa, who can pass on to community. We love to offer an opportunity for you to have a session for the LHON and maybe have another gathering of your patients there. And just come and work with us, and hopefully you will see Dr. Douglas Wallace, what Irina was saying, is one of our advisors for MitoNet. If you have a curiosity of learning more, he will be there with us. So with Patrick Chinery, a lot of the names that you know on the field of mitochondria, we are trying to bring them to Toronto at this time. If you have any questions, I'm easy to find. My name and numbers and telephone and emails are always on the internet. Just type Anna Andreasa Toronto, you will find me. Go to the website of MitoNet, mitonet.ca. Take a look, put your name out there, and I hope to see you in Toronto. Many thanks.